Hi, and welcome back to another divorce chat. I'm Laurel Dietz, the owner of Linea Legal Coaching, and I'm here with Tony Yuen.
Hello.
There you go.
Sorry, cut you off right there.
Why don't you tell us, Tony, who are you, what do you do, and why are you here?
I'm Tony Ewan from Empire Living Real Estate Group from Sutton First West Realty. I'm a realtor in Greater Vancouver, and I've been a realtor for this is my 10th year.
Wow.
10 years. Can you believe it?
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm still around. Yeah, so I focus mainly on residential real estate, including pre-sales. I do development projects, custom homes, you name it, commercial. I've done it all over the past 10 years. So
That's awesome. And so that's exactly why I want to talk to you, because, you know, part of divorce and separation is, well, whatever, selling or splitting up your interest in a house. And then people are always looking forward and needing to plan for the future. Like what do they need to do? And actually you mentioned the pre-sales. I often have clients who are splitting up. They've purchased a pre-sale. They haven't quite completed on it. I mean, that might be a conversation for another day. I haven't a little more basic.
That's interesting. I haven't run into that one yet. So that's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, because I think that's happening a lot because people are buying at pre-sales to kind of get into the market at a lower price.
For sure. Yes, definitely.
Okay, so my first question for you is, what are the unique challenges that come up for you when you're selling the house as the result of a divorce?
So I've done a few, and all the situations have been quite different, to be honest. Personally, I feel like navigating a different level of emotions is the main thing, is the biggest difficulty, because usually someone calling me, I've experienced where I known one of the couple.
Yeah.
I've known both of them. So they're different situations, right? When you know both the couples, also depending on where they are in terms of their current relationship, are they on reasonable terms? Are they on not reasonable terms? That can completely change the way I'm going to approach the situation, because it's quite sensitive. And usually the first time they contact me, I feel like it's very fresh. So it's not like they have sat there and thought about this for months and months about selling property. It's like, we're getting divorced. First call is to the realtor, right? So like you're getting it all. Like you're getting the backstory. You know, you're getting who's wrong. So you end up putting on the psychologist hat and just playing a bit of therapist, and just also giving him the information on the initial steps of what to do. Right. And like all realtors, we just want to advise the best case scenario for the situation and clients himself, especially if you know both. That's the most difficult situation. And how do you navigate that situation? Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can imagine, like, at the best of times, selling a house can be, for some sellers can be kind of an emotional thing. Or buying, either way, right? And so if it's something they haven't had much time to process, and they're also dealing with the grief of the end of this relationship, then you're dealing with a whole host of emotions.
It is a different ballgame. I've also experienced clients who are super reasonable, like they're both just in a good place and they just understand that they just want to move on.
Yeah.
So those cases again is completely different, and they're not difficult. So again, very different situations, right?
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any recommendations to people, potential sellers who are going through a divorce, if they want to set themselves up for success when they're selling a house?
So from past experience, usually what happens is one of the couple will contact a realtor, and they just don't know where to start. So my advice always is, regardless of the situation, whether or not it's a reasonable separation or you're not on talking terms, whatever the situation is, because of the scope of what's going on, I always suggest to get two separate realtors. So each individual has their own representation, would be the best case scenario. Okay. Because as the initial consultation can be okay with one realtor, what happens, I find, is as you get further in the sale, emotions come out that there initially, right? So it's not about money sometimes anymore. It's about memories. It's about just past things get evoked.
Lack of trust can sometimes be,
Yeah.
is a common, I mean, when I deal with our clients, there's a lack of trust sometimes. And if you don't feel like, if you just have one middleman, it's very hard to know, oh, is this person biased or not? So there's certainly, okay, so that's an interesting question. I wanted to ask you is so if you have a representative or two representatives for selling a house,
Right.
purchaser, I guess on the outside, how does that appear to potential purchasers? Is that a red flag, or, not a red flag, but like, is it not, would it encourage lower offers because people are thinking, oh, that's a sale, that's a divorce sale. They're going to accept anything that I offer.
Absolutely. Like, that's a natural human tendency, right? People always love to ask, hey, why are you selling? Why are you selling? So yeah, when you do disclose that, okay, well, it's a separation, naturally they think, well, you just want to sell fast.
Yeah.
That's a natural thought that's going to come to mind. Mind you, when people ask why you're selling, a lot of times we don't have to answer that question. There's no legal entity enforcing us that we need to disclose why we're selling. That's at the confidentiality of the seller, right? But people figure things out because you could see things sometimes that are signs that there's a divorce going on, right?
Yeah.
But again, a lot of this is at the control of the realtor, not the seller and not the buyer. So a lot of times the answer is just, people have lifestyle change, right? People want to move on, move up, move down. That's it.
Do you find in your experience, does divorce, selling your house due to a divorce, does it make them more vulnerable to getting a less than fair value for their house?
This again is very subjective to the situation. So depending on where they are at the time, some clients want to move on, right? And they just want to, whatever it is, just get us out of here. And it depends on how we're handling the situation as well, right? For example, if the seller's on reasonable terms, it's super easy to negotiate and manage the sale on both ends. And I've been through situations where one seller wants to take the offer and the other doesn't. And the deal falls through. And then what happens is you get a second offer, you get a third offer, and it takes time sometimes. Sometimes that first offer, just they're not ready for it. It's emotional management. And I feel like you actually need to let clients sometimes go through that situation because they need to get to a place where they're actually ready to sell. A lot of times when they listen, they get an offer, they're actually not ready to sell, even if it's not a divorce situation.
No,
right?
it's true. It's true.
You can imagine that with that high level of emotion going on, we don't know what's going on behind the backgrounds, right? So our job is just to manage emotions the best to our ability. And, when they're ready, they're ready.
So I guess part of what I hear is for clients who want to be proactive about this is manage your emotions before you're listing and selling your house.
Absolutely.
So that when you're ready to go and sell your house, even in a bit of a more conflictual situation, like you might divorce, is let's get on the same page about this, because then you're going to be less vulnerable to, I guess, predatory offers. And then and also I guess know what your goals are going to be long term. Like if you just want to get out, then accept that maybe you might take a lower value on the house. Then you're willing to sit around and
and it depends on the people involved, right? So the partners, it just depends on where one person is at and where the other person is at, and finding that happy medium. That's really the key.
Okay, so how would you typically, and this will be for any of your clients, I think for someone who hasn't sold their house before, they've had their house for 20, 30 years or even just a short time as the first sale. How do you set a listing price with your clients?
This is a great question. So there's always a lot of confusion between what a listing price is, what a market price is, and sometimes people have to pull up the BC assessment, right? So with any property, even before we set foot to the property, we always run a market valuation. So similar to what a bank appraiser would do, we're pulling up the most recent sales in the area over the course of the last 3 months, and factoring any renovations or upgrades that you would tell us about. And that's how we determine what the market price is today, just today, right? What it's worth. I remember when I first started 10 years ago, we would use market data up to 6 months, up to 7 months.
Yeah.
But as we know, in the last decade, the way that real estate has moved, we have these hyper fluctuations. So it's really difficult to use data that's over 6 months. So you'll see us using 2 to 3 months sometimes because of market changes, right? The market from December to May right now is completely different.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So once we have a market value and we walk into the property, we can make adjustments based on that. But ultimately, the listing price is determined by 3 factors: competition, the current market conditions, and the seller's comfort level, right? So when we talk about competition as a seller, I always advise my buyers to think, or my sellers to think like a buyer, right? Yeah. Are you going to click on the highest price listing in the area, or are you going to click on the lowest price listing? So you want to position yourself where you can dictate how much exposure and success that you get with looking at your competition and how to place it. The next thing is market conditions. Are we in a seller's market, or are we in a buyer's market? Because the way you price is completely dependent on what the actual market condition is. And lastly, the seller's comfort level. So a good example is in a seller's market. A common practice you'll see is listing being priced well below market just to drive a massive buyers, create a ton of urgency, and outweigh the demand with exposure, right? So not every seller is comfortable with that, right? So what I'll do is I'll present the options and I'll explain which option will perform best in this market. And I just allow space for them to decide what they're most comfortable working with, right? And just because you go with one decision, it doesn't work out the way you want it to, that doesn't matter. You can always shift gears and go the other direction. The house is still there, right? Like, it's not gone. No one's forcing you to take an offer. So again, it's just understanding that you can pivot, and that most importantly, it's just understanding what your best options are and what the seller's comfort level is, and finding a happy medium there.
Well, that's really interesting. I really like that approach where you have to think like a buyer if you're selling your house. And that's something that, I've often encouraged my clients is, let's think about what the other party wants in this divorce.
And that's hard. That's a hard thing to do, right?
So hard. I think we're oriented as me. I want this, I want that. And so then you get fixed. And so it does take a moment to take a step back and like shift your perspective a little bit to kind of, and that's a way to kind of achieve what you want, right? Because if you can understand where they're coming from, you can position yourself appropriately. And that's what it comes down to. But it is when in the divorce, when you're trying to get them to think about it from an access point of view, like that is they just say like, no.
Yeah. And that's understandable. That's totally understandable too. And again, putting on the therapist hat, you really have to find different methods of communicating to get them to see them through the process. So it takes a lot of patience, definitely. But you know what? Every deal is different, whether it's divorce or just a regular situation. We deal with crazy levels of emotion anyways. So that's one thing that you do get used to through experience.
Yeah. Just you mentioned, it's really the markets are quite volatile in the sense that they're you can't really look back 6 months and base December, look at your December sales and base it on you base your May sale on that. So these are my questions are kind of for right now in this current moment, Tony. What is the average amount of time? And I guess I'll localize it to where you are working in the Lower Mainland. It fluctuates from area to area. Am I right?
It does. Yes.
Yeah. So at the moment, what's the average amount of time houses are being listed for sale before they're sold? Okay.
So when we're talking houses, single detached only, we're not talking townhouses. It's a big range, right? So houses itself, since I would say from January to April, where we are now, it's been 4 months. So we've seen the average days to sell a house drop from 51 days down to 33 days in 4 months. So that's pretty high. Like that's a 36% drop in time to sell. But that's the big scope of things. When you start looking into macro numbers in little markets and in certain areas, the general consensus is one, supply and demand is totally off. Right now, we do not have enough inventory. That's but more importantly, we don't have enough quality inventory. So when I talk about quality inventory, it's the shiny homes, right? The ones you walk into and you're like, wow, it's all fully renovated. It's got a 2-bedroom suite downstairs. I can move in tomorrow. I don't need to do anything. Like those type of products, they're moving maybe in a weekend, in a week, right? It's moving quickly. So that's what I mean when you look at the micro market. It is a little bit.
So the ones on the market are the ones that are the reno project or whatever, and it's like people are looking at it, passing it by, and they're taking a little longer, and they're skewing the numbers a little bit. So what about let's say a townhouse, so a duplex?
Yeah, so townhouses and duplex, you're not seeing that high level, like the hyper level of movement where things are gone in 1 and 2 weeks. Like I would say there's a bit more supply on that end. And things are still moving, I mean, relatively similar to like what it was in January. It could take up to anywhere like 40, 50 days to sell. Again, it's so dependent on how the product is presented. So, we've been through times where anything was selling. Like you put a townhouse on the market, it doesn't matter if it needs $100,000 worth of renovation. It just sells in a weekend. We're not in that market. So people need to understand that yes, it is a seller's market, but it's also dependent on the product that you're selling and in what area and in certain price levels. So some levels past a certain mark aren't performing, and some price levels below a certain mark aren't performing. So it's a very niche area that's performing well right now.
And that's really interesting because I think people, don't take such a nuanced view of it all. I've certainly had clients who think, well, the market's so fast and everything's speeding up. And it's like, well, but you haven't looked at what you're trying to sell and if it's fast for you or slow for you, and then they so the problem is they're formulating all sorts of ideas before they even talk to a real estate agent who can advise them about these things, as far as what they've got. And maybe they're not even, if they are meeting with a real estate agent, they might not be asking those questions. I mean, I don't know that many people have told me that they get the kind of information you're providing.
Well, that's also the difficulty with information traveling so fast. So when things you're seeing on social media is completely different from what you see on the news. So realtors generally will do market reports that are more macro, like mini updates of what's happening today, like right now, this week, because that's how the market can shift right now. In 1 week, you're buying and selling in different market conditions. And the media can't report that quick enough. They're reporting news that's a month old on how the market is performing. They're using data from April. It's May, for 5 days into May. And sales are changing already in the way things are moving and what demand is like. So you got to talk to your realtor. That's your best route to success for sure.
Okay, and so that's kind of like, timing for sale of your house. A lot of people will, in a separation or divorce, think, okay, well, let's wait until the spring summer market to list the house. Let's, we'll just figure it out until then. Even if they're like, it's September, I don't want to put the market. Is that like a myth, or is that really a smart practice?
I think there's 2 ways to look at it. So when we're talking about this situation that me and you're talking about with divorce, I've never met a divorcing couple say, hey, let's wait around for the spring market to sell the property, because people want to move on. And sometimes it's less about the dollar value, but more about peace of mind and well-being and just being able to move on. So, and really, are we talking from December, like from the spring market to winter market? What's the difference in value? It might be a few percent, but at the end of the day, when you move on, you're also buying. You might be buying, so you might be buying back in that market. So waiting and selling, unless you're a purist in investment and that's all you care about, that's a different thing. But we're talking about relationships. We're talking about maybe they have children. So maybe, if parents are separating, you need to find school catch-them before September. These are all factors you have to consider in this particular situation. It's completely different from someone just, listing a home for sale, because there's just more things to navigate and to think about.
Yeah, no, I think that sometimes people put themselves through a lot more stress, because I do see it happen. They wouldn't be coming to you until the spring because these are the couples, are couples who say, oh, well, let's wait until the spring to sell. But what they're doing is they put themselves through months of essentially discomfort and pain.
Right.
and like having to navigate a really difficult situation because they've convinced themselves we must list in the spring. Let's not list now. It's a bad time. But like you point out, it's like it really depends on what you plan to do afterwards. Like if you're planning to buy in, what's the benefit of having a couple of, extra percent if you're going to pay more for your place? So I think that's really thank you for giving us some perspective on that.
Yeah, again, it's so easy to say, okay, you time the market. Well, we all know we can't time the market, right?
Yeah.
That's the most important part. But secondly is we always put the situation in the back seat. The situation is actually the more important thing. Like, why are you buying something? That's why I like it. Why are you actually selling? It's not about the timing. Why are you selling? Right.
Yeah.
So and then they tell me, well, I need to sell because of this. So I go, then does it matter what the timing is, right? Sure, spring is great because I mean it's sunny, it's nice, but it's not nice right now. It's raining. Right? Like, yeah. I mean, you do naturally get more buyers come out during spring, but naturally you also get more sellers because they all are thinking the same thing. So inventory naturally has more selection to choose from, which means you also have more competition. So every market has its pluses and its minuses. That's why I say ultimately, it's not about the timing of the market, it's about your timing in life.
Yes, that's a really smart approach. I really love it. And I'm going to take that wisdom. I'm going to tell my clients if they try to say, let's hold on. Why are we doing this? Let's talk about the actual cost and like what this means real time for you. Like what are you going to live through and for what benefit? Okay. So my last question for you, Tony, and is just what is your things are so crazy right now and things have changed so much. And I just would love to hear from you what your forecast for this kind of spring summer market's going to be.
Well, I've got my crystal ball and my tarot cards all ready for you.
I'd love to hear your what do you feel? What is coming in for you?
It's just common sense. Like everything follows interest rates, right? Naturally. When the interest rates drops, you naturally will have much more demand come in. So if we're looking at right now, like I just renewed one of my mortgages yesterday, and my mortgage was 2%. It is now 4.84%. So my payments have jumped like $400 on investment property, right? So that's an impactful decision right now on how it affects the market. The interesting thing is with the market, the interest rates have dropped from like about 7% down to like 4.5%. Like between 4.5% to 5%. There's buyers are out there competing in multiple offers for houses.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So we're back there again.
Yeah, so we're back there again. Like to the extremes that at one point I've heard like stories of 54 offers and things like that, right? Like that may be a one-off, but like I do hear from my mortgage broker, even myself, right? Like we're walking into multiple offer situations at most times for some properties. So when we look at if the interest rates hold or continue to drop and our supply does not increase, that's the biggest problem is there's nothing to buy.
Yes.
Like there's just not a lot to choose from.
Yeah.
So what happens, right? Well, it's just common sense. If supply is low, demand is high,
so
the market keeps going up. Right? That's just
operating right now, and you've got a really nice house, and you want to get out. This is your time.
Yeah, but there's a lot of factors that are going to come into play, right? Like we're going to see a lot more immigration come in.
Yeah,
things have opened up. We have a lot more traveling coming through. Rental rates are impacted right now. I'm not sure if you know about that, but rental rates are insane.
Yes.
So all this is contributing to when you're asking me, well, what do I think is going to happen? Well, for the short foreseeable future, naturally, if we don't increase supply, we'll just continue to rise.
Yeah,
naturally in the short term. But if we look at the market from 5 years, 10 years, like I always love to, it's Vancouver. We can't build fast. We'll never catch up to demand. Let's be real. So are we going to see 20% spikes? Are we going to see incremental 2 to 3% spikes? It's going to be dependent on how interest rates get played, how inflation is going to come into play, and ultimately supply and demand is going to all come into play of that. And we'll see how that's going to unfold in the long run. But my money's on the Vancouver real estate always. It's just improving, right? Can't go
Yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
Well, that's I guess like end on a high note so people can relax a little bit, if you've got your place. If you don't have your place, that's, another issue. Maybe we can talk about another time.
Yeah, you can call me afterwards and we can talk.
Okay, so Tony, if someone wants to get a hold of you, they like your style, they want to hear more about what you've got to say, how can they reach you?
Yeah, you can reach me through my phone. That's easiest, 604-889-3368. But I highly suggest to check out my website. It's empyre.ca, EMPYR.ca.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tony. And if you like this video, please hit like, subscribe, follow us, and we'll be back next time with some more lovely content. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Cheers.